Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, and all my MB friends listening out there. Happy Valentine's Day. You are listening to Sacred Voices on KGNU. If you did not know, Sacred Voices is an Indigenous-led youth organization focused on poetry and the spoken word. We go around to local schools in the area teaching Indigenous and Hispanic youth the basics of poetry and try to uncover what is sacred in their voice. We also hold an open mic every month, the fourth Friday of every month at 700 Kalamath Street at Denver Open Media. The next show that we have happening is February 28th, not the last day in February. This is a leap year this year. That will be at 6:30 p.m. if you're interested. For more details, please visit our website, sacred-voices.org. Today in the studio, I have Mr. Aerik Francis.
Hello.
How are you doing today, Aerik?
Feeling good, feeling good.
Now, you were the featured performer at our January open mic. We heard quite a few poems from you there, and we're actually going to hear one or two of them today on the show. But if you could just give us a little introduction to yourself. Tell us about your poetry. Tell us about you.
All right. Hello, spirits. I am Aerik Francis. I go by Phantom Poet. Born and raised in Denver. I went away for a little bit, but I'm back and I'm doing big poetry things out here. What is my poetry about? It's about me. It's about all of my identities, any possible social identity that I could possibly think of myself having. My poems are about that. So fatness, queerness, blackness, Latinidad, being multiracial, what have you. And I try to make it interesting and make it relatable to everyone else who maybe doesn't share my identities, and especially for those who do.
Thank you very much. And we are going to hear a little bit of that here in just a second. I have on my notes a lot of what you just said. When listening back to the performance from January, I said, well, these are the things that I'm hearing in all of this. And I'm going to pull that up for our listeners right now so that they can take a listen to it as well. So for everybody who just joined in, we are about to listen to Aerik Francis, a live performance of his from last month. Let's take a listen.
This next poem is about my, identities. I'm multiracial. The easy route is to just say I'm Black and Latinx, but as a poet shared with us a little bit earlier, the term Latinx is fraught. It's in my personal Latinx, Latinidad is fraught with, there's some French dudes in there, there's some Spanish dudes in there, there's some English dudes in there, but then there's also a lot of indigeneity mixed up with that. I'm also Black, and that comes with a whole other set of questions when it comes to identity. So this poem that I'm going to share, it's called Bodies of Water, and it's about those confluences of identity, and it's also about that frustration of continuously being confronted with histories and saying the origin point is something like ancient Greece, but we know that the ancient Greeks were taking from Mesopotamia. We know that they were taking from Egypt. And so this poem says, I too am a Black Gaia, a Black Poseidon, a Black God. This is Bodies of Water. Smiling mixed kid who long to grow an afro, instead found Afro-pessimism entrenched in the tresses and the roots. A tale wretched and everlasting like skittering tomb scarabs instead seeps deep and sticky into bittersweet cocoa follicles. Us earthen peoples with our history's igneous, ebon melanin atlases, our spines crack like plate tectonics, his spine cracked like plate tectonics, an earnest convergence of culture and conscience, of harmonics and demonics, of masonics and electronics, of peoples and perishables. Un moreno sonriendo, quien espera por su afro propio, su lengua propia. En lugar se encontró la eternidad en los raíces y en el pelo quebrado. Hay un lugar con maíz como oro en la tierra, en lugar se convirtió conocido pero cocido con sangre y agua. And a smiling mixed kid knows of rivers, rivers as ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. His spine cracks like plate tectonics. Our spines crack like plate tectonics. Ebon melanin atlases we are, oily Poseidons we are, charcoal Gaias we are. Our spines crack like plate tectonics. Our ears crave radical tonics, and our lips, they yearn for bodies of water. So our mouths drink rivers, and a smiling mixed kid armed in fists with an afro pick instead bathes in confluences and nothing more instead. He dreams of a future of rock and rain. He dreams of a past fossilized and brought to the present. An obsidian Hyades, we will all be. Ashe.
And that was Aerik Francis performing at Sacred Voices January open mic. And he's with us here in the studio. I know it could be kind of awkward to listen to yourself perform like that, but you seemed pretty into it. You were following along. I noticed that.
Yeah, try when I do a performance, I try to have my poems memorized so that I can like really, stare down the audience and be like, "Hey,
right,
you feel this, I feel this, we're here." Not that there's anything wrong with not memorizing poetry, but for me, I really like that connective aspect of performance, and so I like directly connecting. So I try to have it memorized, and so when I hear it again, it's like listening to a song.
You're like me in that sense. There have been quite a few people at our open mics who go up and they'll do like improv poetry or they'll read it from their phone or something, and I do it. I'm like, if I go up and perform something, I'm like, I have to be able to know this inside and out. There's no way around that, really.
Yeah, and I mean, there's imperfections that come along with it. I think in the recording, I sort of heard myself trip up at the beginning, and that's a part of the poem. I think I like that as well in the live performance aspect, where, if you mess up, then you mess up, and we all get to see it, and it's okay. You know, it's a part of the poem.
Right. So one thing before we start talking about the poem, for the listeners out there who are bilingually challenged, do you think you could translate some of the Spanish portions of the poem?
Yeah, totally. So I think I said in that intro that the poem is about basically me being multiracial and really wanting to like figure out where those confluences come, which I think is where that confluence river imagery comes from. Excuse me. And so let's see. There is one stanza that's in Spanish, and it's supposed to sort of mirror that beginning part that I see as talking about some of my history of blackness and sort of only being shown like pessimistic views, and much the same with Latinidad. And so let's see. I say, hay un moreno sonriendo quien espera por su afro propio, su lengua propia. So it's basically the same sort of style as the beginning, where I said a smiling mixed kid who longed to grow an afro, and in that part I also say an afro of his own and a language or a tongue of his own. Let's see. En lugar se encontró la eternidad en los raíces en los pelos quebrados. He discovers I discover within my own hair, since I am mixed, there's a particular hair texture, and I discovered there exactly that mixture of black, that mixture of Latinidad, that mixture of everything that comes with that, just within my hair, the follicles itself. So let's see. And sort of in extrapolating from like what I discover there, let's see. Hay un lugar con maíz como oro en la tierra. So there's a place with corn like gold in the land. So I was sort of speaking about less Colorado because it's not necessarily known for corn, but like the Midwest and these lands that we live in and how corn is like a vital resource. But just sort of relating to indigeneity and the land, I guess, in that line. And then the final line in Spanish is en lugar se encontró, or hay un, let's see, se encontró la dignidad en los raíces y en el pelo quebrado. Un lugar con maíz como oro en la tierra, en lugar se convirtió conocido pero cocido con sangre y agua. So that land that the speaker in the poem is talking about becomes something else. It becomes familiar, but also like uncannily so. It becomes like cooked or soaked with the blood, with rain, with water, with the elements and all that sort of stuff. So I think, yeah, that's sort of what I was trying to go for in that line.
Well, thank you for that. That's very, it elucidates a lot of what is in the poem and a lot of the message that you're trying to convey, I think. Could you talk to us a little bit about your personal experience living at that intersection of that multiracial identity, that intersection of being Latinx and Black? What is that like growing up?
Before I get to the growing up, one of the things that I've been thinking about in relation to that intersection right now, so there's a sort of literary movement happening among Latinx writers who are responding to the publication of this book called American Dirt. I don't really want to give it more airplay than that, but suffice it to say that it was a book that was written by someone who didn't actually live an undocumented experience such that they could truly write authentically about it. And a lot of Latinx authors were upset because they're like, hey, we're out here, we're talking about that experience, and we're not getting compensated in the way this other person who doesn't have the experience is. And it was an interesting conversation, but one of the things that I find really interesting about that conversation is that you don't see references to Afro-Latinidad, you don't see references to Black writers within Latinx camps. And so on one hand, these Latinx writers are complaining about whiteness, but on the other hand, there's sort of a reinforcement of it in the lack of Blackness. And so that's really frustrating. It makes sense because we want to come together as a community and say this is an issue that pertains to my community, but our communities are so complex and interconnected that oftentimes when we say this is our community, sometimes it can come at the expense of other communities. And I think we need to do a better job of really incorporating and including everyone, even when we fight for our own communities. So to go back to the question of like where that mix comes in, growing up, it means I'm kind of like, an oddball. There's the common thing that happens with multiracial people that's like, oh, I'm too Black for this and I'm too Latinx or I'm too white for this. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that. In fact, one thing that I think was really interesting is how inclusive the Black community has historically been, but for me growing up in particular, even though, I'm racially ambiguous and I look like it, the Black community is always like, hey, I see you. I feel a connection here. It's good. Whereas sometimes in a lot of like Latinx communities I'm in, there's sort of a pushback to that Blackness, whereas there's less pushback to the Latinness that I have in Black communities. So I find that interesting. It's not necessarily that case all the time. It's a lot more complicated than that, but I often feel that I have to put my Blackness first because it's the thing that's most under critique or attack.
That's I hear what you're saying, and going back to the importance of the intersection of it all, and being able to support multiple communities while trying to lift up your own in particular. And that's one of the great things. I'm a bit biased, but talking about our open mic in particular, how
Totally.
It is ideally or originated as an indigenous space, but anybody's welcome. It's an open mic, and anybody can talk about issues facing their community or that they've experienced themselves or whatever. And talking about that, it emphasizes the importance of that in particular. So there's a lot of things that I want to get to in this interview, so I want to try to speed it up a little bit. Before we play the next piece from you, I wanted to ask you about a couple of things. So you talk about social media and digital presence in a couple of the poems that you did. If you could just talk to a point about that, like what are your thoughts on how online we are now?
Yeah. So I feel like the first thing that I want to say in regards to that is I think it's really important for me as a poet of this day and age to talk about technology and its impact and have that flow through in my poetry. I think oftentimes there's this push for poetry to seem like timeless, and you have to have images that like are more universal or more open. But for me, because I grew up on screens, TVs, the beginning of internet, computer, the beginning of video games and all of that sort of stuff in the way that it is now. It's not, of course, not the beginning, but like this real surge of like growing up with that sort of thing. And so it's really important for me to incorporate like not only what it means to live a digital life, but like the nuances of that, what it means to live my digital life. So I had a few poems that I shared in that set. One was called Lagging, and the other is called Digital Footprint. Lagging was a poem. I don't remember when I wrote it. It was a few years ago. It happened. It was a really funky poem in terms of like form, because I wanted the form to sort of look digital, to look laggy. And I never thought about performing it until one day I saw someone on stage doing something I might consider lagging, like not necessarily stuttering, not necessarily a speech impediment, but like these repetitions, these lapses in time, these pauses. And it was like, whoa, I could really play with this in the performance aspect. So I do. And the beautiful thing about that is I think it really sort of hammers home that connection I'm talking about between like living a physical life and living a digital life, and not really being able to separate those as cleanly as we want to. The other poem is called Digital Footprint. I'm going to go on a little side tangent here because it is a sonnet, and I love sonnets. I used to hate them because in school it was like, oh, here's Shakespeare and his like 1,200 sonnet about something. And it was all rhymey, and it's a small form. It's really cute, but it felt really rigid in school. But the older I got and the more I started reading poems, the more I'm like, wait a minute, my favorite poets are writing sonnets, and they don't look like the Shakespeare kind. They pretty much, the only resemblance that they have is that they're 14 lines. And so the form became really interesting to me because really all sonnet translates to is little song. So it's just a little song. The whole reason why people write in iambic pentameter is because, well, that's how we speak. We speak with a particular cadence, and often our most used phrases, if you were to diagram them, they'll look like poetic feet. So the iambic pentameter part of a sonnet, like, take or leave, because it really is just a reflection of how we speak. Same thing with rhyme. When we think of a song, we want to rhyme, but we also know that many songs don't have to rhyme. So when I learned that a sonnet was really just a little song that you can play with, it sort of opened up my writing. I've been writing sonnets about Colorado. I've been working on a collection of sonnets about Colfax. So to go back to the one we're talking about, Digital Footprint, it's a little sonnet, and it's basically about our social media archives. There is a way in which that's what they become. We tweet something in a day, and then next thing you know, 2 years later, it's popping up in your memories as an archive. And we've seen a lot of celebrities get in trouble with this on Twitter, turns out that, geez, pick a celebrity at this point, and there's a tweet hidden in their social media archive of them like saying the N-word or some horrible slur. And so there's this point in the poem where there's this line I really like, and I think it gets to the crux of everything. It's like, all of my cadavers unearthed. Am I afraid? And that line for me is like, am I afraid of people going through all of my old stuff and saying, hey, this was you, and I'm going to use it against you because you just put it out there? Mm-hmm. But then the next lines are sort of like, well, yeah, I am afraid, but like, does that just mean I'm afraid of the truth? Does that just mean I'm afraid of like a past me? What does that say about this idea of progress, right? Because we have an idea of progress that's very linear, and it says, right now, I'm the best I've ever been. I've been improving the entire time. But the unintended consequence of that idea of progress is that your past self sucks.
Yeah.
They're horrible. Everything you did in the past is worse than what you did right now. And I don't subscribe to that. Sometimes I look at, like, I always say to myself, like, past Aerik is hooking it up. Because sometimes, I just set stuff up so that I'm sitting really nice right now. It doesn't happen all the time, but I think there's this way in which we get this nostalgia that becomes really ugly when we think about the past and trying to be better. And ultimately what I think that poem is about is like, hey, if we have social media archives and we sucked back then, that's something we can learn from. That's not something we should shy away, be afraid of, try to like hide. That's that, if it comes up again, as is so possible in this digital world where things don't get deleted as easily as we think, everything comes back to the surface. So really, long story short, that's sort of what I try to get in those digital poems, is that this digital life is not so disattached from our analog life. To be really pithy about it, someone there's this quote that always comes to mind when I think about YouTube, and I don't know who said it, but they were like, behind every YouTube commenter is a person. And it's just really sobering because those comment sections suck, but then you're like, well, someone's there doing that. It's not all robots. Yeah. It's not all like ghosts. So yeah.
Yeah, that it speaks to a lot about cancel culture, like you're saying. Right. I mean, it's influencing things as big as like politics, world leaders. Like people can be brought down by 140, well, I guess 280 characters now. But so I think this is a good time to transition to this was the poem that you used to close out the night at the show in January. So I'm going to play that, and then we'll have a minute or two to talk about it.
Sure.
So the last poem I have for you all is about lying. I think I've been telling the truth for most, maybe not. I don't know. This one's about lying. I think there's a way in which in our society we say, tell the truth and do not lie, but we're all liars and we can't do that. And I think one of the best things we can do to mitigate that is not to set platitudes that we can't actually achieve, but rather simply just to be honest about our lies. So this is my attempt to hold myself accountable, being honest about myself being a little liar sometimes. Oh, and I should mention that this poem was written after Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin. They had a conversation on this show that I wasn't alive to witness but saw on YouTube, and everyone else can see it on YouTube, would highly recommend. It's called Soul, and it was filmed in 1971, and it was a conversation between Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin. And there's this beautiful moment where Nikki Giovanni in this conversation with James Baldwin says, I need you to lie to me and smile the way you can smile and lie to your oppressor every day. Why do you take out your horrible truths on me when I come home? And that really resonated with me. So I wrote this poem. All right, no more talk about it. Let's do it. This is Lying to Live. James Baldwin once said that he could never lie to the ones he truly loved. But that was a lie. And Nikki Giovanni knew that we would love and lie, and there may be a reason why, but what matters most is us here, living and loving and lying together, and that's okay. I've already lied today anyway. See, I haven't really slept in a while, so I've been faking my dreams and calling it living lucid and calling it inception, deception, depression, and calling it on the phone for company. Can you blame me? I mean, if we all woke now, then where are the dreams? They're getting harder to remember. They keep getting misquoted and manipulated like MLK's dream. We've been exploited and baited by the American dream, and it seems that dystopias were created as lies we called paradise. Do you ever wonder if some of our more fundamental truths are based on lies, like outdated textbooks with colonial missions written and riddled with lies of omission? They say the truth is cold, so maybe that's why Mother Nature lies boldly. Picture a winter sunny day that brightly belies the season's consistent frigid pricks. In other words, the weather fronts. Besides, there's no use denying the importance of lying to that voice that just whispers in your ear continuously, you're dumb, you're ugly, you're worthless, you're alone. Raise your hand if you've ever told a lie before. Let me read the lines of fiction in your palms. I already know we're liars. I just want to know what kind, so we can create little layers of liars and call them falsehoods, or call them duplicity cities. Call them fib cribs, or just call them when we need to. Let's be honest. It makes us uncomfortable to admit that we live in a society that lies habitually. But what is lyric without liar? Sometimes you have to lie to survive, rooted in this world of untruth. And do you know why we don't admit our lies? Because too many times a day, our truths are denied before our eyes. Because too often we gender criticize to all of our demise, because we can't recognize the violence and how patriarchy socializes. Because too many times do femmes arrive home not to smiles, but to ire, guile, and domestic violence, because police departments lie. Because police departments lie and say that they don't make their money to have a monopoly on crime, all while they eschew indictments as their victims die, while trying to hide the thousands of rape kits that remain uninvestigated and sterilized. So tell me, where is the lie? So maybe I can't handle the truth anymore. Maybe the truth is never tangible enough for me, and brutal honesty is just that. Brutal. But give me the brutal world just as it is, just as we are, dying to live, lying to live. I will look you all in the face. I will look the world in the face and still say, life is a beautiful thing. And there are many reasons why. Ashe. Alrighty. Thank you, everyone. That has been
All right. If you are just joining us, that was Aerik Francis performing at Sacred Voices open mic in January, and he is with us here in the studio. That was Lying to Live. We don't have too much time left, but I would love to hear some words from you about this piece. What can you tell us about it?
So I said it in the intro, but I'm really about citations in my poetry, and I got to give it up to Nikki Giovanni. So she inspired this poem both in how she was replying and speaking to James Baldwin in their conversation, but also just based off her poem, Ego Tripping. I used this line a number of times, and there may be a reason why, and I used that line because that's a part of the title of Ego Tripping, which is There May Be a Reason Why. Which I really like. She's using it to describe, like, you know, there might be a reason why I'm, like, so great, you know, because she's ego tripping. But there's also reasons why, for a lot of things, including why we lie. So it felt right to make that ode there. And while I'm at it with citations, I just want to shout out for the previous poem that I did, Bodies of Water, includes some Langston Hughes lines.
Oh, okay.
About I said, a smiling mixed kid knows of rivers, but it's from his poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers. So citations, that's one thing I want to shout out in my poetry.
Important stuff. Yeah, I really liked this poem. I thought it was a great way to close out your set.
Thank you.
And Gosh, I'm looking at the time, and I'd love to talk about it more, but we just don't have too much time left in the interview. So if you could just real quick talk about lying in general. I know you said a lot in the piece as it was, but if there's any other thoughts that you have on it.
I think that lies are a really essential truth that we don't really like. We notably get angry when people lie to us, and that's natural. It's fair. We don't want to be lied to. But at the same time, when you know someone is lying to you, that says a lot. It says something about, you never know the reasons why someone's lying. It could be as malicious as you think, and it could be something really benign. But I think the second we're able to like recognize lies as that, then we have a lot more wiggle room to like speak about the truth or somewhere in between, right? Because if lies give us a truth, then what kind of truth is that? It's not 100% truth, or maybe it is. I'm not really sure, but it certainly suggests that like the binary isn't as stable as we thought it was.
I think you've given a lot of people out there something to think about, and that's really. I'm certainly thinking about it, all the lies and truths about it, the truth within the lie, and being able to tell like from what people are telling you, just stuff about that.
Yeah, I mean, it came up from a conversation where I was just like, so if all of us lie, why don't we call ourselves liars? Like, why is the term liar so loaded? It's almost like a slur. And when you call someone a liar, it's like definite. It's like you're a liar forever. You are a liar about everything in the past. Nothing you ever say is possibly true. And that doesn't seem right given how frequent, if someone plays tennis once a week, you might call them a tennis player. If you lie once a week, you're not going to be called a liar. But we lie probably even more than that.
Right.
I'm sure I lied about something stupid today.
Yeah, I'm sure I did too. I know it's kind of ironic given all of the talk we had about, online presence and all of that, but could you plug yourself and, talk about your Instagram, your Twitter, your social media and all that?
Yeah, for sure. I like saying hashtag don't follow me, but you can if you want. So I am on social media. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. The handle is Phantom Poet, and that's spelled PHAENTOMPOET. So that's Instagram and Twitter. My name is Aerik Francis. If you want to see me perform in Denver, I have a number of shows coming up. I will be performing at the Mercury Cafe Sunday, March 1st. That starts at 8. I am the feature, but there's also an open mic and slam, so please come and share your words. I'm also performing at Blush and Blue in the Out Loud Queer Showcase. That is on Saturday, March 7th. Also at 8. That one is a musical show, so, my poetry could be musical, but like if you like music, definitely show up for that one. It's at Blush and Blue, which is a great venue. There's some more shows coming up as well, but you can follow me on the handles for those. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. Definitely go check out Aerik and all of his performances. If you liked what you heard from those clips that we had, you can see the full show online on our YouTube channel. Just look up Sacred Voices on YouTube, or you can find it through our website, sacred-voices.org. As far as our handles for social media, on Instagram, we are at Sacred Voices Denver. On Facebook, you can look up Sacred Voices. Just look up Sacred Voices and you will find us online wherever you are interested. For now, Aerik, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. Shout out to Sacred Voices.
Thank you. And we will see you next time. Thank you very much.